webinar, which is on Spectralink DECT application integration. What we want to present to you this morning is some capability of the integration between the Spectralink DECT solution and messaging servers and middleware platforms, etc., to deliver some additional capability into the overall DECT solution. Things like driving efficiency gains and enabling better task management for the users of the solution, to essentially mean that they're able to perform their jobs better and access information in a more timely way that, again, allows them to do their job more effectively. So looking at the list of people who are attending, it seems like most of you, or in fact I'd say probably all of you, have seen or in fact used or sold or support the Spectralink DECT solution and may have done for quite a long time. So that's great. You'll have a good understanding of what we're talking about, and some of you have probably implemented, in fact I know some of you have, elements of the solution that we're talking about today, which is great. So hopefully we can fill in some blanks and bring some information to you. I'm going to actually record this webinar, so at a later stage, if you wanted to refer back to it, you can download it from us, so I'll make a link available at the end. And also, if you have any questions, please feel free to type them out in the questions box. I know it's in there somewhere in your interface, which you should be able to expand on to the right-hand side of your screen. It's been a while since I've been in there as a listener, so I've got a different menu structure to you, but hopefully it's fairly straightforward where the question box is. And if you put any questions in there, then at the end of the webinar, we'll answer those for you. I've also got a co-presenter today, as you've probably seen from the intro screen, which is Matt Ryan from Local Alarm Solutions, and Matt's going to be presenting some of the application-specific information. And I know for a fact that some of you have a relationship with Matt already and have used the product that he is the sales manager for the company of LAS, so probably have a good understanding about that. For those of you that haven't, I'm sure that's going to be worthwhile for you to become aware of what Matt's solution can bring and the value that it can add to your customers' Spectralink DECT solutions. So some of the key points that we want to address today is the MSF messaging, and MSF stands for Message Service Function, and that's Spectralink's messaging protocol that they use internally within their infrastructure and handsets to deliver alerts and alarms to their handsets. The supporting systems that take advantage of this, and what I mean by that is effectively which components in the Spectralink DECT solution support the MSF functionality and to what level they support it, because to take full advantage of the functionality, then we're going to need to know which parts that we will have in our solution to enable us to take advantage of that. Application integration. This is really the key reason for the solution that we're talking about, and MSF effectively, and the supporting systems that enable you to use MSF, really all there, and the outcome of using those is the application integration component. So that's really the end game. What we want to get to is, how do we enable the applications, how do we integrate them, and then how do we, via doing that, present the alerts and alarms and task lists, etc., to the handsets that the user is using in their normal job function to take advantage of all the things that underlie that, such as the protocols and the hardware. And hopefully that's enough reason to, I guess, incentivize your customers to want to upgrade if they don't have a system that currently supports this functionality. If it isn't, then we certainly want to just point out a few other reasons why you definitely want to have the latest Spectralink DECT infrastructure so you can take advantage of all this stuff. This table here, which I can fully appreciate you probably can't really see that well, so what I'm going to do in later slides is zoom into it and look at various components that I think will give some context around what we're talking about today. But this is effectively Spectralink's application reference guide, and it's really a matrix that shows you the various hardware components in their solution and what can we take advantage of as far as getting the outcome of integrating those applications into the solution. There's a link down the bottom there if you wanted to have a closer look at that document. Then certainly you can visit Spectralink's website, and there's a lot of good information on there. And just on that note, I'd certainly encourage anyone who doesn't have a Spectralink support portal login to go and create one, because Spectralink support site has a lot of fantastic information on all of this stuff and more. So if you were, for example, trying to find a application solution that delivers what your customers need specifically, then there's a whole lot of information there that will help you do that. So just a little bit more about what is MSF. So as we said earlier, that stands for Message Service Function, which is Spectralink's own protocol that they've developed, and it's something that's evolved over time. So where we are today and the capabilities that we can deliver with MSF is something that's been a progressive thing over time. So even though some of the older Spectralink, or even what was badged as Kirk solutions back then, had some MSF support, they won't support the capability that the current iteration of MSF can deliver today. So the current MSF, which is actually MSF version 3, is supported on all the current model DECT servers. And effectively the main benefit of MSF and what it delivers is messaging between the Spectralink DECT server and any DECT handsets that are connected to the DECT server. And again, that's to allow them to have effective method of communication other than voice, where messages will be flowing to those handsets either via, let's say, some sort of building management system or a nurse call system, because I'd say certainly for Wavelength, and probably true of most of our partners, healthcare is the big vertical that this stuff is being deployed in. Or it might be from either of those types of systems or even additional types of systems, but where they can't directly integrate, then potentially you'll be bringing that into the Spectralink side of things via a middleware platform. So just a really basic history. I don't want to go too back because we want to look where we are today, but the initial MSF format 1, so if anyone has some KWS 1500 servers out there, or probably KWS 500s as well, probably not many of those left, but there's certainly a lot of 1500s out there, they supported MSF format 1, and that basically allowed just a single handset to receive a message via the server, and required a dedicated channel to be available to deliver that message. So for example, if the handset in question was on a call, until they got off that call, they couldn't receive the message. Very basic. And only a one-way messaging. There's no way for the handset to send any information back in response to that message. Then we had MSF2, which still didn't support two-way interactivity between the DECT server and the messaging component. So, for example, if a message was deleted or ignored from the handset, then the messaging server wasn't aware of that. So there was no potential for escalation based on an action being taken or not taken by the user. So for example, if a user didn't respond to a message that was sent to their phone after a set amount of time, for example, then the message wouldn't be resent because there was no way the server would know what happened on the handset side. So fire and forget is probably a good way of describing it. MSF3, which is where we are today, a message can be set to a single handset, it could be a group of handsets, it could be all the handsets in the system, and then we can have a confirmation received back from the handset based on a user's acceptance or escalation of that message, and then the server can be updated, and then based on what the server's programmed to do, can then bring in another set of actions based on that response. So it gives us that two-way interactivity, which is very important for us. Also supports things like broadcast messaging, which I'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation, and advanced handset functions like task management. So if you think of an example of a carer, let's say in an aged care facility, where they're getting a lot of tasks come in at one time, and before they can finish the task that they're currently working on, they might receive one or more tasks or alerts that come in the meantime. So being unable to respond to those all as they come in, the capability to go back into a task list through the handset, have a look at the tasks that have been sent, and then work out, okay, what task am I going to do next? How am I going to prioritize these tasks based on the level of the alert that's been sent, and also, for example, the timestamp of when that alert came in. So that's an important function and efficiency that this sort of capability delivers. So the Spectralink API is not really all about MSF, so because MSF is internally what's used between the DECT server and the DECT handsets through the rest of the DECT infrastructure, but in order to integrate with the other component, which will be driving these messages to the DECT server, so again, it could be a nurse call system, could be a building management or a middleware messaging solution that provides a translation between those other types of solutions to the DECT server, then that's going to be using a different protocol, an open standard protocol, and over IP these days what we use for that is XML RPC. So that's XML remote procedure call, and that's a standards-based protocol that allows us to integrate with these other systems. So just to come back to that big matrix slide and have a bit of a closer look specifically, what I'm trying to highlight here is a couple of things. One is that we can look at the list of handsets there and identify which of the handsets that are going to allow us to take advantage of the MSF3 functionality which I was talking about, and what is that functionality more specifically we'll go into shortly. But we can see there that all of the handsets support some version of MSF, but it's really only the 76 series and the 77 series, which you may also know as the 60 and 70 series, and their old product codes, support the current version of MSF, which is MSF3. Likewise, at the bottom of the table, we can see the current version or current models of the DECT servers, and there's 4 of those obviously, and those also all support MSF3, which is really important. And then we can see how they can also tie back into the external component, which again would be the messaging. If we look at another section of that same table, we can see some of the benefits in terms of each column being a feature or a function of the application integration that those handsets that do support MSF3 can take advantage of. So things like multicolor LED control, color icons, that's a key part of this, the color icons, which is the second last column, and task lists, which I also mentioned there as well. So all of the handsets in the 76 and 77 series range, in fact nearly all of them I should say, can take advantage of those particular features. Certainly they can all do color icons and task lists, and then there's a couple of handsets in there which support Spectralink Safe functionality, which is their advanced duress capability, and that's the 7640 and the 7740. And what they basically do is allow the user, if they can't manually signal that there's a situation where they need assistance, and that's typically going to be a duress situation, then there's other capabilities that the handset has via using the MS3 capability to signal that a response is urgently required, and we'll talk about those as well a bit later in the presentation. So the different handsets and how they fit into all this, the top line there, the 74 series or the old 40 series, I'm sure you've all seen those, they've been around for a long time. The limitations that impact on the capability that we're talking about here is firstly that they have only a black and white screen, so there's limited capability to display clearly and concisely the messaging that we want to send to the handsets, and basically that's text only, and they only support MSF1 and 2, and that's one of the, well, that's the reason basically why they can't support color icons and logos as far as the messaging display, because that's a function of MSF3. The other key thing that you may not know about these handsets is that they will shortly be end of life from Spectralink, so no longer commercially available, and that's something that is going to happen towards the end of this year and the start of the new year, and not something you need to worry about, but obviously need to be aware of it, and we'll be running a webinar very shortly on how that's looking and what that means, because there will be additional handsets that replace those, but those additional handsets will be higher spec and better capability, more in line with their more recent handsets. So we'll address that, as I said, in an upcoming webinar in the near future. The second line there, we can see what's called the Butterfly series handsets, and also the 75 series handsets. Now these ones do have a colour screen, but they still only support MSF versions 1 and 2. So we're limited again in that we can only display text message. Yes, it might have a colour background, but it really doesn't allow us to take advantage of that in any way, shape or form. And probably equally as important to putting these handsets into a vertical environment is the fact that they aren't ruggedized at all, and they don't have an alarm button. So both of those things will be a significant inhibitor of the type of functionality that we want to have or need to have in something such as healthcare. So they're really not much good to us in the scenarios that we're talking about. And then of course the last line, as I said, the 76 and 77 series, well, they have a colour screen, they support all iterations of MSF including the latest, they have a full feature set. There's options for advanced duress, so 2 of those handsets, one in each of the families of those 2 have capability for advanced duress, and all bar one are IP64 rated. The other one that isn't is IP54 rated, and that's the 7710. And they're all military spec, so that's to do with your bump, shock and drop. So, you know, in all aspects of protection, whether it's ingress of dust and particles or moisture, or just bump, shock and drop capability, then they're certainly suitable and fit for purpose for healthcare and other vertical environments, as well as that they can take advantage of all the messaging capability. Colour screen's important because we can colour code our alerts and alarms, which means at a glance we can quickly evaluate and assess how urgent is this alarm, what's the criticality level. So that's really important. It removes a text limitation because obviously, as they say, a picture tells 1,000 words, so we can flash up an icon with a colour. We can also have a description of text underneath that, but we may not need to really look at that too closely because straight away looking at the icon, we know exactly what we need to do. Can assist with language barriers. One of the things in some of these verticals, and specifically healthcare and aged care, is a lot of the caring staff, the carers, often don't have English as a first language. They might have, you know, limited English, and so sending a text message to a handset is not going to be as effective in conveying the information to them as an icon. So that's another key thing as well. And we can show additional bits of information such as, okay, here's an alert for this situation, but okay, here's a slight variation of that, which means we actually need multiple people to respond rather than one, and can sort of fill in a bit of information around this in a later slide where we've got some pictures of some of these icons. So again, we're really looking at the 76 and 77 series handsets, which support all the things that we need there. A couple of examples of how it might look from an MSF3 type screen on a handset that's received an alert or an alarm compared to, say, a handset that has a black and white screen and doesn't support the icons and only supports text. So again, just to highlight the fact that at a glance we can have a lot better conveyance of information using the latest capability compared to what was available previously and what is probably still widely deployed out there. So this is the sort of stuff that will help you make a case for your sales to environments that you may have an older system which supports some of the, you know, earlier iterations of MSF and has the older handsets as well. Here's some of the information how we can drive them to see the benefit and the value that upgrading their equipment will deliver. Context awareness is also a component of MSF3 that wasn't there in the previous iteration. So just a couple of quick examples. Okay, we've got a carer who's on the phone. There's an alert of a critical nature that is being sent. We can have that set to either drop the call because the person really needs to look at the message, it's extremely important, or have that play a tone over the top of the call so they know, okay, I've got to check the message straight away. If a handset is in a charger, let's say at the nurse's station, because often they'll be sitting there on charge, the nurses at the station are doing their work, they don't want the tones going off all the time because often there's a lot of tones, but they want the ability to see the handset and monitor, so we can say, well, if it's in the charger, for example, you know, flash up the message but don't play the tone on top of that. Some of the icons and examples of icons now, to be completely straight up with everybody, some of these colours are in development with Spectralink, so certainly your blues and reds and your green at the lower icon there is current. We're working with Spectralink and it's on their roadmap to deliver additional icons in green and yellow, and that's basically to suit local market requirements, whereas in the US they just use blue and red. So that's something that's ongoing, and we expect to have an update on that soon, where that's been incorporated into their MSF3 function, just to allow additional flexibility in how we present messages to the screen. But you can see, regardless of color there, the icons quickly and effectively convey to the person looking at them what is the situation, what is the type of alert or alarm that I'm receiving, and the text that can accompany that also gives them the additional information. For example, where do I have to go to respond to this alert or alarm? And if you look at the second icon in the top row, you can see there's a little red circle with a person in there. That's going back to a previous point I made, that in some alerts you need an additional person to respond, so not just one responder, I need more. That little red circle can convey that to them. Now, if you had a black and white screen with limited space for text, then you may not be able to effectively convey that message, but with an icon we can easily show that information. And we also have just a screen capture at the bottom there, where the user can actually respond to an alert, accept the alert, so the other users know, okay, that's been taken care of, and then clear that alert as required. So that's the two-way interactivity that MS3 is bringing, which wasn't there in previous versions. If it's red, we know it's critical. So we can see that there's various icons we can use, and each of those with the red background indicates that it's a critical thing and needs to be responded to urgently. And one of these, Matt's going to show an example of some of the LAS stuff, which we can see is utilising that emergency alarm, the critical red icon there. Okay, so now we'll talk a bit about application integration and how that looks in a practical sense. Just flashing up some messaging partners here now. There's a lot more than this. I've just wanted to put some names up there that you would recognise. Now, some of those are obviously nurse call providers, and some of those will be able to integrate directly with the Spectralink server to deliver some capability in terms of messaging. However, you can often get more functionality on top of what the native nurse call integration is by using a middleware messaging solution. So that may be something you want to look at, even if your system does natively support integration. And some of those other messaging solution partners you might know of as well, because they have a local presence. And at this point here, I'd like to now ask Matt Ryan to come in and talk a little bit about his section. So I'm going to make Matt the presenter at this point. Just bear with me for a moment. Okay, now Matt, I can't hear you, so I'm thinking you might be on mute.
Everyone.
There we go, great.
So again, good morning everyone. My name's Matt Ryan. I'm Sales and Marketing Manager for Local Alarm Solutions. We're a messaging integration specialist. Obviously Chris has been talking this morning about the KWS and SIO as a, or MSF, correct me, as a protocol, and I suppose that we would like to help you add functionality to both the handsets and your customers by being able to offer specific solutions to them, and those solutions are based around this protocol and us enabling features on the protocol. So Chris has spoken about the alarm buttons and having those alarm buttons. So those alarm buttons are actually located at the top of each handset and can be used specifically on some of the more basic models just as a duress button, and we're able to effectively allow the user to push the button, and that message then goes from the DECT system back into LAS an LAS will then be able to distribute that alarm as a duress message with a location based on the handset's location on radio signal strength. I've got a little video here, so I might just play that now for you. LAS multi-guard solution with duress buttons being pushed in one sector and sending an alert through. The guards in another sector are then notified. So as you can see there, that took advantage of two of the functions Chris was talking about this morning. The first function was, in fact, the actual duress button, the physical button on the handset, and the second function was the icon being displayed. So LAS took that information in. It used the location from the base stations and signal strength. It then redistributed that out to a specific group of individuals or groups of individuals, and that message was then conveyed to them via the icon, and that icon was selected by LAS with the priority. So again, Chris showed quite a few different icons. Those icons can be changed to suit the particular priority or alarm type or event that's occurring. Here's another video showing a similar event. I'm just going to play that for you now. Testing the LAS interface for duress on IP. Sending the alert message, the duress, and then you see the duress, the position, loungee, and the person who has depressed the button. So that is actually showing the solution without the icon and just the standard text in colour. And again, it was showing the three important components, which was who, where, and what. Obviously, we're in the health industry, and it is a very important sector that we work in. But it's not the only sector, or it's not sometimes not the only thing that you're being asked to integrate many different systems. So we just got a bit of a slide here showing the possibilities that we can have many systems integrating into LAS. They don't have to be just nurse call systems. They can be physical duress systems. They can be motion sensors, the running sensors on some of the handsets. But they can also be fire alarm systems, air conditioning systems, access control systems, security systems, and all those together can be interfaced into LAS as a middleware solution and then pushed out to those phones over that MSF3 protocol. A lot of the IP integration as well. If you have a customer that may be interested in some of this function, but you know that the system you currently have doesn't allow that type of input, we can actually translate a lot of the older inputs. So if you've got a nurse call system or even a security system that might be just a straight serial feed, we can convert that into IP and then use each one of those particular alarm types to convert that out to the MSF3 protocol, therefore allowing the current nurse call system that you have in place to maybe remain in place for longer for the client, but also give the client the functionality they need to be able to give them extra functionality on those particular functions. You'll see here I've got a general room alarm, we've got door alarms, we've got elevator calls, we've got fire alarms, and we've got maintenance. Now what you might see there on the screen is the maintenance alert also has a reject function. So this is part of the higher level of MSF3. It allows the user to interact with not only the messaging server, but also the other users via the messaging server. So you have the possibility now for a particular nurse or carer in a healthcare organisation, or a maintenance person in maybe hospitality, to actually receive a set of alarms or alerts and then interact with those to be able to show his or her colleagues the fact that they have accepted this particular event, we'll call it, and they are able to take that event and to complete that event, or maybe they cannot complete that event, so they can then accept or reject the particular event. Obviously, man down, it would be critical in that particular instance that the security group or the extended service group that was receiving the message was notified that someone in that group had, in fact, accepted that particular duress event, and they were going to follow up on that. The next slide I have here is basically a very simple diagram to give you all an understanding of the different protocols that we've been speaking about, mainly the MSF3. So you can see that's going from the actual DECT system through the base station and out to the actual handset. You can see there that you've got a nurse call point and you've got a nurse call server. That could be anything from the latest server with an IP interface to maybe a very old server that we're converting serially the RS-232 printer string, or even an RS-485 display string, maybe on an OSCO system or something like that. We're converting that to IP and we're pushing that straight into LAS. It's then being programmed to say this particular nurse call event is this priority and needs to have this repetition of alarms, needs to have this color code. We need to send this type of icon, and so those things are all defined in the actual messaging server itself. It's normally communicating between the messaging server and the DECT server is communicating via SIO format 3, which is serial input-output, or the preferred method is via IP today using the XML RPC protocol, allowing for quicker communications, better broadcasting, more interactivity. The messaging server can then see which phones are offline, which phones aren't receiving messages. There's a lot more information that the messaging server can take back to send in automated reports back to the client or to the maintenance team or to yourselves as you're looking after that particular site. Here's an example. So we've got a system, we've got a messaging service, we've got the DECT system that's having the alarm button pushed, and that's then sending the message out to 3 particular handsets, and they're seeing that there's a duress in the west wing, very similar to the video that I showed you further, and that's not going to, extension 205 is the person having that particular duress event. Here's another alarm call, and it's actually at this particular point pushing also through a PABX to send messages to IP phones. There are also some IP integrations that have been done onto IP handsets by LAS, so you can actually show those messages directly on those PABX phones as well. And what I'd like to do now is hand back over to Chris.
Great, thanks Matt, that was good. So just to get things finished off, because that was the main, I suppose, part of it, application stuff and visual things that we can see and see how that really does deliver some benefits to the business and to the users' workflows. Just to finish off with some of the capabilities in the duress side of things. So there's the Spectralink automatic alarm call capability, and the stuff that allows you to do, and this is via a software license, because if you're just doing straight messaging, so for example, sending those types of alerts and alarms from a messaging server or a nurse call server into your DECT server to display on the handsets, That is native capability on the Spectralink side, and that's not something that you need to provide licensing for. However, there's a couple of instances where you may want to expand on that or have a specific scenario where a license will be required. It's just a software license, and it's the automatic alarm call license. And these are the scenarios where we would do that. So there's some advanced duress capability which I mentioned as part of that matrix there, and that has the following capabilities, and that's enabled via both a tear-off string and also a motion detect chip in the handset itself. And that will enable us to do, let's say we're a warden in a prison, okay, someone rips the phone off their belt, or we're being attacked and we can just pull the phone off our belt. That can trigger an alarm automatically. If we're running, so if we're in an environment where we shouldn't really be running unless something's seriously wrong, we can program that up to have that generate an alert, the duress situation to the system, which we can then escalate. If we're fallen over or we've gone down for some reason and the handset is lying on its side, then that can also trigger a duress event. Or if the handset just has not moved for X amount of time, then that also shouldn't be part of our normal workflow. That can also be programmed to deliver a automatic duress situation. So they're the capabilities that will be delivered by this automatic alarm call license. And again, we don't need that license for all the stuff outside of this, but still using messaging. The other scenario would be if let's say we don't have a messaging solution, but we do need the capability to utilize the alarm button on the system to make an emergency phone call. So we can use this same license and have it when someone presses their alarm button on top of their phone, that automatically dials a predefined number through the phone system. So that might be a group of users within the environment. It might be the security team locally. It might be 000. That's also a capability of the system. And this, an example quickly for the visual side of that, tear-off string gets yanked out of the handset. That sends a notification to the DECT server, which, being integrated with a messaging solution, then sends that information to the messaging server, which then escalates based on the programming and says, okay, we're going to send an alert to these particular destinations, which in this case is a number of other DECT phones on site. So this is a similar slide to one that Matt had. The difference is this is activated by a tear-off string, or alternatively could be the phone falling into a horizontal state or not moving or in a running state, as opposed to physically or manually pressing the alarm button on top. We've obviously focused on healthcare. That's where the majority of all of us, I think, find most of our business, including the DECT systems and integrating that with the messaging capability. However, any vertical that you put these systems into will have some systems that they can take advantage of integrating into the DECT solution to provide those notifications. These will be the other, and we'll, including healthcare, but manufacturing and retail and hospitality, and some examples of what might those systems be. Okay, so that's really it as far as the application side of things. I just wanted to highlight a few things and reasons that because we do have a lot of 1500s out there in the market, and unfortunately or fortunately, I guess there's pros and cons however you look at it, but from a sales point of view, and when we're trying to sell to customers, the 1500s have been almost a little too robust. They've lasted a long time, and as a result, there's still a lot of them out there, and customers are saying, well, that's all right, we've still got a working DECT solution. We'll just stick with this, rather than, obviously, we want to go out there and say, well, hang on, there's reasons you should update that, and all of the things we've spoken about so far are obviously a big part of that, the capability. However, what are some additional points we might make if we need to really drive that home that they need to upgrade or think about it? Well, first of all, the 1500 server has been end of life since 2009, so that's 6 years ago. Can't get parts, it's unsupported, so if you call up Wavelength, well, we had to escalate something to Spectralink, forget it, there's no support there. And obviously that's going to be a problem when the day comes that the customer has some sort of mission critical issue and the whole thing stops working. No more parts availability. This is one of the big drivers why people do upgrade. They can't get an additional card or cards, they want to expand it, or they have a card failure, but the server still works fine and everything else still works fine. Well, there's going to come a day when that next happens to them, that they just can't get parts because they're not there. and all of a sudden they're stuck. So much better if you can have this conversation with them and point out all these reasons why they should be looking at upgrading, and then we can do this in a controlled way, in a properly scheduled out plan for an upgrade, and make sure we don't get caught out with that situation. Because if the system fails, whether it's the server or some components within that server, in a mission critical environment like healthcare, you can imagine the repercussions could be quite severe. Some additional benefits of the current systems, and I'm specifically talking about 2500s and 8000s because they closely map to the equivalent 1500 in terms of the connectivity and all that sort of things. Obviously there's other IP systems I mentioned as well, but with a 2500 or an 8000 we can also now support IP connectivity. So we can put IP base stations if we want, we can put SIP extensions and run off a SIP-based PABX, which is really the common thing these days. Analog is phasing out, it's still there for sure, but these days it's more about SIP, and we can have the flexibility to either use digital bases, and in a lot of cases we can maintain their existing bases if they're the correct part numbers. So they're not necessarily going to have to go and buy a whole heap of new base stations. If they do, they're going to have the option to put IP in as well, which might fit in more, might be more suitable with their current network and their cabling infrastructure, etc. Broadcast messaging support, which I'll talk about more in a minute. MSF3 support, I think we have a good understanding of what that delivers now. Easily upgradable, we've got modular cards that are hot swappable, so if we need to add cards, replace cards, etc., we just slide them in and out. Unless it's a CPU card, we don't even have to power the system down. So, we can add additional extension capability, we can add additional base station capability, not even interrupt service for the active system, which is great. Broadcast messaging basically is going to allow us to message all handsets or groups of handsets, predefined groups of handsets. Handsets might belong to one group or more groups, as well as the entire group of handsets on the system. So it's really useful for getting messaging out to the users, and that incorporates all the MSF3 functionality that we've spoke about so far. Delivering information to a large number of recipients at the same time. A critical situation like a fire alarm, obviously that is a key activity to be able to fulfill. We've mentioned about the different capability of grouping handsets, which is all very useful. Text message icon, we've talked about that as well. So you can see why in a healthcare environment, where you really need to get in contact with the staff in the right time, to the right people, broadcast messaging is a key capability. And again, these are things we can't do, any of that stuff on a 1500, or maybe there's even some 500s out there. So to put this in context, this is something that is a promo you may know about, you may not, but definitely good to be aware of. So we have a upgrade promotion, and look, if you do have a 500, this will apply to that as well. It's just there's a lot of 1500s out there. So, but this offer's good until the end of the financial year. And essentially what it is about is upgrading or providing an incentive to the customer to upgrade their infrastructure, their 1500, and take advantage of some special pricing to do that. So there's 3 offers on the table. Essentially what it is, you buy some of the MSF3 capable handsets, so the 76 or 77 series handsets, and if you also buy, depending on the deal, some of the cards, then you will actually receive the server at no cost. So looking at those deals, there's one for 2500 and there's a couple for 8000, one for analog connectivity and one for IP connectivity. Now, looking at the numbers for those, each of those equates to somewhere between $3,000 and $4,000 saving for the customer. So you can imagine that if it's presented the right way, and that would incorporate everything we've talked about in today's webinar, then you should be able to, hopefully in some instances, be able to use that as a real carrot to get a customer to say, okay, the time's come, the 1500s, we've certainly realised our investment on that. We need to be looking forward and make sure that we're going to have all the features that we need and we're not going to fall over unexpectedly. So that promo, as I said, is good for another 6 weeks roughly, and the information is all on our website. So I'll circulate the webinar at the end of the session, but Certainly, if you go to our website and you go under products, there's a hot deals section, and you'll find this promo and other promos available there to view. Just talk to your local channel manager for more information about that one. Okay, and just finally to wrap up, the key things that we talked about, the MSF3, what is MSF, what are the benefits that we can get from that, and what are the devices that support that, how does that translate into real business efficiencies for the users and the businesses, and that's through taking advantage of those using a messaging platform like LAS, integrating with our nurse call systems, etc., to push those capabilities into the handsets and to the users. Additional reasons to upgrade the 1500, which are all really important from a business continuity point of view. And lastly, obviously, the upgrade promotion is there, and we've sold a few of them already because I think it's fairly compelling price benefit or cost benefit to the customer to take advantage of that before the end of financial year. So I'll just, before we close it off, I'm just going to have a look at our questions panel. We don't seem to have any questions. Now hopefully that means between Matt and myself we've covered off the key points and hopefully done so in a way that's fairly easy to understand. If you do have any questions going forward, please don't hesitate to give me a call or speak to your channel manager. We could certainly put you in touch with Matt. As I said, I believe most of you already have a direct relationship with Matt, so between LAS and Wavelink, we're certainly happy to discuss anything else that we've covered today in further detail. I've just got one question popped up. How do we implement MSF3 to an existing system? So if you're talking there about an existing DECT system, Spectralink DECT system, then if it doesn't natively support MSF3, and that would be both through the server model and the handset model, then that would require an upgrade to those components. If you had the current model DECT infrastructure and handsets, but you had an older messaging platform, whether that's a building management system or a nurse call, for example, or a security system, and you wanted to get that working with your current Spectralink gear, but it didn't have a compatible protocol, maybe it runs on serial, then that's where something like your middleware, such as an LAS, would come in and basically translate between both those two systems to make sure that the the messaging coming from that third-party system can be translated into a format that will work with the Spectralink equipment. So hopefully that answers that one. However, like I said, if you need more information about that, please give me a call. So thanks everybody for attending, and look forward to running some future webinars for you, and we'll advertise these through our newsletter, but also you can expect to hear from your channel manager if they're relevant. As I said, one of the main things that we want to talk about in a very near or very soon to run webinar would be what happens when the current 74 series handsets are end of life and no longer available. What is Spectralink putting in their place and making available? All about that offering. So that's something that will be coming up very soon. But we're looking to run more webinars across all our products going forward, so please just keep an eye out on our online calendar for information about those. Thanks very much for attending, and have a good day.